The Donkey's Gift, Chapter 4. It was a sight that early risers in Nazareth would long remember. Mary, a surpassingly beautiful woman, great with child, dressed in a cloak of finest wool and seated on a sheep wool-covered chair atop a gray-white donkey. Joseph walked ahead through the marketplace, while 3 men, neatly dressed and leading 3 other donkeys, followed in single file, as if Mary were indeed a queen, and they were her entourage. A silence fell over the busy street as people watched this strange procession. Though the departing travelers looked quite majestic, one of them was mortified by the many eyes upon him and his burden, which consisted not only of Mary, but bulky packs on each side. Aeneas could not overcome his shame at bowing so publicly to the will of a human being. But if he wanted his cherished freedom, he must accept this heavy load, at least until nightfall, when he would be able to slip away into the far hills of Galilee. The sun had taken the chill off the morning by the time they left Nazareth and began picking their way along the rocky trail, down the long hill toward the plain of Esdraelon. To the sure-footed Aeneas, however, the precipitous trail was the least of his worries. He didn't trust that trio behind them, Ichabod, Jabez, and Caleb. He wished they were in front so that he could watch them, but Ichabod had declined Joseph's suggestion that he and his friends should take up the lead. "We take up the rear," he said, "guarding your beautiful wife from danger." When they reached the bottom of the hill, they entered the most fertile plain in all of Palestine. Flocks of sheep and goats grazed on the slopes at the northern edge. Cypress and carob trees dotted the landscape, which was still green despite the early winter. To the right and left were vast olive, fig, and tree groves. All of the first day's travel would be across this broad, pleasant valley. Their destination for the night was an inn near Jezreel, a town about 15 miles from Nazareth. The route was smooth and fairly level. By midday, when they stopped for bread and wine under a carob tree, they had already come more than halfway. While the people ate, Aeneas introduced himself to the other 3 donkeys who were grazing with him. Their names were Aaron, Amos, and Hephzibah. They wondered about his name. Aaron said, "It doesn't sound Jewish." "You're not a Roman donkey, I hope," said Amos. "Oh, no, it's just that my first owner was a Roman, and I haven't been able to live it down." "Well, you're a handsome brute anyway," said Hephzibah, a rather large brown jenny who had already passed her prime. Amos said, "She thinks every jack donkey is handsome." "Present company excepted," Hephzibah said sharply. "Tell me about your 3 friends," Aeneas said. "They claim they own a brickyard in Capernaum." At this, all 3 brayed. Amos said, "Capernaum? I don't think they've ever been that far north. They're from Jerusalem. But 2 of them, Jabez and Caleb, once did work in a brickyard." "And did they learn to crack whips and throw knives in a brickyard?" said Aeneas. "No," Hephzibah said. "They learned that on the highways." "Just as I thought," Aeneas said. "What are they planning for this carpenter?" The 3 donkeys glanced at each other uncertainly. Hephzibah finally said to Aaron, "Tell him what you heard." "Why should I?" he said. "If those devils don't come into some money pretty soon, we won't eat." Aeneas shook his head in exasperation. "Listen, I've lived my life around thieves, but those 3 look like real cutthroats. I'd like to know at least what they have in mind." After some hemming and hawing, Aaron said, "I don't really know what they plan to do, but I think I know where they plan to do it. Have you ever traveled this road before?" "Several times." "Then you must know that deep gorge in the mountains between Jezreel and Enegman, where the road becomes just a narrow ledge on the side of a cliff. I heard Ichabod say that was the best place to do it, but he didn't say what they wanted to do." Aeneas felt relieved at this news. "We couldn't possibly get that far before tomorrow afternoon. I won't be with you then." "What do you mean?" "As soon as it gets dark, I'm taking off into the Galilee hills. There's enough grass up there to feed half the donkeys in the world, and places where humans never go. It's paradise." Ooh, take me along, Hepzibah exclaimed. I'd be happy to take all of you, Aeneas said. I don't want to get away from donkeys, just people. Amos said, that sounds tempting, but how could we manage it? They tie us to trees every night with heavy ropes. I'm not surprised, Aeneas said. Too bad you don't belong to my carpenter. He never tries to tie me at all. When the company set out after the midday meal, the sun was so warm, Mary was able to take off her cloak. Why don't I walk a while, she suggested, and lighten Aeneas's burden. Joseph wouldn't hear of it. I don't want you walking in your condition, he said, and I'm sure Aeneas doesn't either. Any donkey would be proud to carry a burden as lovely as you. Finally, she took her seat as Aeneas fumed in silence. If Joseph was so proud of her, why didn't he carry her? Since the road was fairly wide and smooth through the valley, Joseph walked alongside Aeneas, talking to Mary. How do you like our companions? He asked. I don't know, she said. I thought it was nice of them to offer us cakes after our meal. Tasty, weren't they? Delicious, she said. He waited, but she said no more. I get the feeling you have reservations about them. I haven't really talked to them, she said. Jabez and Caleb are rough-hewn, I'll admit it, but Ichabod is well-spoken. He must come from a good family. Maybe so. Mary, is something about them bothering you? What is it? I don't know. He shook his head. Sometimes, my dear, I think you're too suspicious. Aeneas felt a momentary touch of pity. Though Joseph was a human being and therefore not worthy of a lot of sympathy, he didn't really deserve to be robbed by those thugs behind them. Despite the afternoon warmth, the road was sparsely traveled. Winter was not a popular season for journeys. Only 3 or 4 times an hour did they pass people going the other way, and they had not seen anyone going their way. Joseph was glad of this. We should have no trouble finding a room, he said. The sun had just disappeared behind Mount Carmel when the road came leading up to Jezreel. The inn they sought was one Mary remembered from her journey the previous summer. Nestled among oak and sycamore trees, it had several private rooms, and in addition to beds, each was furnished with a table, chair, and candle. Ichabod, Jabez, and Caleb shared a room so small, Joseph wondered how the 3 men could fit into it. For wealthy merchants, he said to Mary, they seem wonderfully frugal. I admire them for that. Ichabod, Jabez, and Caleb tied their donkeys securely, but on long tethers so they could reach a patch of rich grass. See, they don't treat us so badly, Amos said to Aeneas, who was grazing untethered beside them. What was that thumping sound I heard behind me this afternoon? Aeneas said. It sounded to me like a stick meeting a donkey's backside. Yes, but these fellows at least find us good grass. Yeah, otherwise they might have to buy feed for you. What are you saying, that you've decided not to run away with me? I'd love to escape, Aaron said, but it must get pretty cold at night up there in those hills. I'd go in a minute, Hepzibah said, but how can I with this tether holding me back? You could shoot through the rope. You think so? Look how thick it is. It sounds to me, Aeneas said, as if you're all afraid to make a break for it. Well, nobody's holding you back, Amos noted. Why don't you go? Not until dark, Aeneas said. If you run away while it's still daylight, the whole countryside comes after you. I made that mistake in Nazareth. It was almost dark now. Ichabod, Jabez, and Caleb emerged from the inn to make sure that their donkeys were still secure for the night. Seeing Aeneas, they stopped to take a good close look at him. Caleb said, Ain't he the biggest donkey you ever saw? I can see why the carpenter bought him, Jabez said. But would you pay 12 shekels for a runaway? That carpenter's got to be as dumb as he is rich. He'd better be as rich as he is dumb. Or we're wasting a lot of time, Ichabod said. Hey, look, Caleb exclaimed. He forgot to tie the beast up. Ichabod got a firm hold on Aeneas's headstall. Turning to Caleb, he said, Go get that chain you brought with you. Aeneas, realizing he was in trouble, bucked and reared in an effort to get away, but Jabez kept running to aid Ichabod. In the fierce struggle that ensued, Aeneas was able to stomp on each of their feet a few times, and even landed one good sideways kick on Jabez's upper leg. He could not, however, fight his way free of the two men. Caleb soon appeared with a length of chain, and Aeneas was tethered even more securely than the other donkeys. Exhausted, Ichabod and Jabez sat down to nurse their bruises. "I'd like to kill that beast," Jabez swore. "Hey, Caleb, take a stick and give him a few good licks for me, will you?" Caleb, who had not been much involved in the struggle, nevertheless willingly picked up a cudgel and approached the donkey. "Leave him alone," Ichabod commanded. "If he's crippled tomorrow, how can he carry those two up into the mountains?" Caleb said, "I never thought of that." "You never think of anything. If we fail on this job, you can forget all your dreams about the fun we'll have in Jerusalem." "But what if Ezekiel was wrong?" Jabez suggested. "What if this carpenter's got no money?" "Zeke saw his purse," Ichabod reminded him. "Besides, the purpose of his journey is to pay his taxes, so he has to have money." "When we get through with him," Caleb said, "he won't have no taxes to pay." Jabez said, "I can't wait to get rid of them, then I can have my revenge on this vicious donkey." Ichabod said, "No, you won't. I don't want anyone to come along and find the donkey still with us. How can we explain why they fell off the cliff if the donkey didn't fall?" Jabez said, "You mean we got to push him off too?" "Of course. When they find all three bodies together, the people will blame the donkey. They'll think he lost his footing." A prolonged shudder racked Aeneas's body as he overheard this conversation. He almost wished he had taken his chances with Ezekiel. Though he had suspected these three were cutthroats, he could not have believed that they could perpetrate such foul murders simply to steal a purse. The evil in men's hearts never ceased to amaze this proud donkey.